I could hardly believe my eyes. There was Ella, my wife of 5 years, sitting shirtless on the lap of some guy in the hot tub below. Their faces told a clear story. They were definitely involved in some sort of intimate activity. I was furious and quickly shot a short video on my phone. I thought about changing into swim trunks to join them, but decided against it. Instead, I stayed in the room, wondering why Ella didn't want me at the party. Ella had been working as a secretary at SG Funds for about a year, and she had seemed genuinely content. Now, it all made sense. Earlier that week, I'd found a text on her phone about a company Christmas party that included a +1 invitation. When I asked her about it, she tried to dissuade me, worrying I might be bored surrounded by finance experts discussing money. I was confused and asked if she was embarrassed to be seen with me. She reassured me it wasn't about embarrassment, but rather about the anticipated dullness of the event. Her company's monthly parties were usually staff-only affairs, which meant Ella often stayed out late or overnight. I never minded before, but now I understood what these events were really about. I acknowledged this without fuss, and Ella mentioned that if I did choose to attend, I should make sure my tuxedo was cleaned. However, she warned me that I might not enjoy the party. On the day of the event, she suggested I bring swim trunks. I questioned the appropriateness of trunks for a December Christmas party, and she explained that after the main party, they usually ended up at her boss's penthouse with a nice hot tub. I took this information in stride, and she admitted that this was a regular occurrence. She then asked me to promise to behave myself that night, and I assured her I always do, though it didn't sound very convincing. Curious about her sudden openness, I asked why she was telling me this. She said that sometimes the parties could get wild, and she didn't want me to get upset, mentioning that the guys there could be quite touchy. I asked if there would be any problems as long as things passed the husband test. She just smiled and kissed me on the cheek without saying a word. At the main party, Ella introduced me to her friend Sophie as her husband. Sophie's smile and her comment about husband being fun, along with referring to Ella as a wild and crazy girl, left me puzzled. Ella just giggled, said she needed to mingle, and told Sophie to join her in getting a drink, specifically wine. Without looking back, they left. I went to the bar, got the wine for Ella, and grabbed a beer for myself. Despite scanning the room, I couldn't find Ella. I searched for her but came up empty. After about half an hour, I sat at an empty table, hoping she'd come find me. I watched the lively dance floor and felt increasingly invisible as people passed by. Ella had been right. I wasn't enjoying myself. Growing frustrated with her abandonment, I nursed my beer for a couple of hours before deciding to call it a night. If she wasn't going to spend time with me, I would head home and let her enjoy her time with her friends. As I was heading to the exit, Ella and Sophie showed up with 3 other guys, one of whom had his arm around Ella's waist. Skipping introductions, Ella greeted me with a slightly tipsy, "Oh, there you are." When she kissed me, I tasted tequila and something else. I told her I was about to leave since she had ditched me 2 hours ago and asked where she had been. Ella blushed and avoided eye contact while the guys smirked, so I decided not to confront them. Sophie mentioned they had been taking a few shots. Ella looked confused by Sophie's explanation, which made me even more curious. I asked Ella about the shots, noting the taste of tequila. She brushed it off, saying they were heading to Ryan's place where the hot tub was ready and asked if I was coming. I said yes, but asked if I would actually get to spend any time with her, or if she was planning to ditch me again. She told me not to be silly and that I'd see her later. She opted to ride with Sophie and the guys, suggesting it was fine if I followed. I suggested she ride with me, but one of the guys grabbed Ella's hand and pulled her away, which only annoyed me further. Ella and Sophie headed out with the guys, and their laughter filled the air as they left. I jumped in my car and followed them, my mind racing with a mix of confusion and anger. When I arrived at the destination, I was taken aback to see Ella lounging in a bikini. I hadn't anticipated this scene at all. As soon as we got there, I noticed Ella already settled in the hot tub with 2 guys who turned out to be Ryan and Jack, senior partners at her firm. They struck me as nothing more than wealthy frat boys, arrogant and entitled. Sophie approached me outside, a mischievous glint in her eye. She asked if I thought we could get together later that night. I was taken aback and asked her why she'd think that, stressing that I'm married. Her surprise was evident as she said she thought we had an open marriage, judging by Ella's behavior with other guys and the way Ella had kissed me earlier. Her comment hit me like a ton of bricks. Confused and frustrated, I asked Sophie to clarify what she meant by the kiss. Sophie's face grew serious as she revealed that Ella had already been intimate with Ryan and Jack. A wave of nausea swept over me, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Sophie's expression changed as she saw my shock. "Oh my God, you didn't know, did you?" she exclaimed. I admitted I didn't and asked how long this had been going on. Sophie's response was a punch to the gut. She told me that this had been happening ever since Ella joined the company over a year ago. I was in utter disbelief, realizing that Ella had been involved with them the entire time, and I had been completely unaware. I felt a deep sense of betrayal and hurt, wondering if that was what she had been doing at the party. Sophie said Ella had been involved with those two guys and a few others, apologizing and assuming I was in the loop. Sophie tried to reassure me, saying that despite everything, Ella genuinely loved me. I responded with a sarcastic tone, doubting the sincerity of her supposed love. Sophie suggested I go upstairs and change, hoping my presence would help Ella keep her behavior in check. I scoffed at the idea but made my way upstairs. That's when I saw Ella with Ryan and Jack, her hands all over them, clearly enjoying their company. Despite my love for her, I couldn't tolerate what I was seeing. I decided to confront her, so I stormed downstairs. As soon as Ella saw me, she questioned why I wasn't in my bathing suit and if I planned to join them in the hot tub. I grabbed her arm and yanked her into a nearby room, slamming the door behind us. I demanded to know if she ever intended to tell me about the open marriage. I played the video on my phone, showing her with the two guys in the hot tub. I questioned her about the situation, wondering if this was her way of humiliating me further after abandoning me at the party. Ella tried to downplay it, saying they were just having fun. She admitted to being intimate with them, but insisted it didn't mean anything. I was stunned and told her it meant everything to me. In a moment of raw emotion, I took off my wedding ring and placed it in her hand, then removed her rings from her left hand. Ella looked at me, bewildered, and asked what I was doing. I told her I found her actions utterly disgusting and expressed my current hatred towards her. I wished her a Merry Christmas, informed her that I would be seeing a lawyer about a divorce on Monday, and told her not to bother coming home. Despite her desperate pleas and declarations of love, I remained indifferent, stating that I no longer cared about her desires. I made it clear that I understood why she didn't want me to come with her, and said my final goodbye before turning to leave. One of the guys, I couldn't quite tell which, called out after me, questioning why I was leaving so soon and complimenting Ella. I replied casually, saying she was now theirs. I left the penthouse, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. I went down to my car and drove home, trying to block out the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. Ella started calling and texting me almost immediately, but I ignored every attempt. Once I was home, I deleted all her messages and blocked her number, determined to cut off all communication. I changed out of my tux, grabbed some trash bags, and began tossing her clothes and belongings into them. It felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. I packed her things into her car and moved it out of the garage. I removed the garage door opener and changed the code so she couldn't get back inside. By then, it was about 2:30 a.m., and I was completely drained. I collapsed onto the bed, feeling like a heavy weight had settled on my chest, and fell asleep almost immediately. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of our house phone ringing incessantly. I picked up the receiver without thinking. "Yeah," I said groggily. Ella was on the line, desperately asking me to come and get her. I coldly responded that she was no longer my concern. She begged for a chance to talk, but I insisted that any further communication should go through my lawyer. I told her her car was parked in my space, packed with all her belongings, and then I hung up. She called back immediately, but I disconnected the house phone, unwilling to see her face or hear her voice again. I fell back onto the bed, trying to shut out everything, and plugged the phone back in. When I woke up that afternoon, feeling more coherent, I noticed her car was gone. Good. Maybe she finally got the message. I started looking online for a divorce lawyer and read everything I could find about the divorce laws in our state, trying to prepare for the next steps. Since we were in a community property state, The lack of real estate and children meant there wouldn't be much to argue over. With no children involved, there was no child support to worry about. As for alimony, Ella's income was comparable to, if not slightly higher than mine, so I didn't anticipate any significant financial obligations there. I also learned that while most divorces here were typically no fault, the state did allow for cases based on infidelity, cruelty, or misuse. Such cases could be more costly and time-consuming, but honestly, I didn't care about the extra hassle. I was focused on getting this over with. I found a number for a lawyer named Mia Thompson, and I planned to give her a call on Monday. While I was jotting down notes and trying to prepare myself for the upcoming battle, my cell phone rang. I noticed it was an unfamiliar number, and since it could be Ella or someone else, I decided to answer it. The voice on the other end identified herself as Sophie. She told me that Ella was staying with her for a few days. I confirmed my intention to proceed with the divorce, trying to keep my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. Sophie expressed concern for Ella, describing her as a wreck, holed up in her room, and on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I remained indifferent, stating flatly that Ella had brought this upon herself. Sophie asked if I still had any lingering feelings for Ella. I responded honestly, saying that my feelings were now dominated by hatred and disgust. I made it clear that Ella's infidelity had gone on for over a year and that she had humiliated me publicly, which left me with no illusions about our relationship being over. Sophie tried to reassure me by saying that Ella still loved me. I was skeptical, questioning what Ella had been up to after I left and how long they had stayed at the penthouse. I demanded to know if Ella had been with Ryan and Jack again, seeking a direct answer. Sophie reluctantly admitted that they all got together after my departure to console Ella. She even suggested that I might have had a good time if I had stayed longer. I couldn't believe her audacity and ended the call, saying goodbye with a mix of frustration and disbelief. After hanging up, I noticed a couple of text messages from unfamiliar numbers. They had arrived early in the morning after I had gone to bed. When I checked them, I found videos attached. One message read, "Missed one hell of a party, bro." I played the video and was stunned to see Ella engaging in intimate activities with 3 men at the penthouse. Ryan and Jack were recognizable, but the third person was a stranger. The unknown man looked directly into the camera and said, "That's quite a wife you have there, brah. Too bad you weren't here." The video ended with a close-up of Ryan holding my wedding ring. In the second video, Ella held the ring in her open hand, smirking at the camera. My hatred for her surged, overwhelming me. I transferred the videos to my PC and made a copy for my lawyer. I briefly considered sending the videos to all her friends and family but decided against it for now. Mia Thompson's website had warned me to be cautious about my reactions, as any negative behavior could undermine my case. Given that advice, I decided to keep a low profile. I didn't hear anything from Ella or Sophie for the rest of that day and the next, which was actually a relief. I spent the weekend focusing on erasing Ella's presence from the apartment, packing up her belongings, and clearing out anything that reminded me of her. On Monday, I reached out to my boss to explain the situation and requested a brief vacation. My boss, who had been through a divorce from an unfaithful spouse himself, empathized with my situation and granted my request. I then contacted Mia Thompson's office to schedule an appointment for that afternoon. On my way to the appointment, I stopped by the bank to handle the financial side of things. I took steps to disentangle Ella from our joint accounts, settled her joint credit card, and canceled it. I withdrew half of our assets to open a new account solely in my name. Mia Thompson reviewed the divorce laws and suggested I consider pursuing an alienation of affection lawsuit against Ella's employers. She acknowledged the outcome might be uncertain, given the evidence I had, but left the decision up to me. I agreed to proceed with her recommendation, wanting to make sure they faced some of the public humiliation they had subjected me to over the past year. After our meeting, I paid a retainer and headed back home. As I was driving, my phone rang. It was Sophie again. "Hello," I answered curtly. She proposed a meeting with Ella that afternoon, which I declined, adhering to my attorney's advice to maintain distance. Sophie offered Ella's contact information, and I gave her Mia's contact details in return. Despite Sophie's attempts to advocate for Ella one last time, I firmly rejected any notion of forgiveness. I made it clear that Ella should expect divorce papers soon. I concluded the call and drove home, making a quick stop to pick up a 12-pack of beer and a couple of packs of cigarettes. Having quit smoking when we first got married, I felt the urge to engage in something to cope with the stress and prevent any self-destructive behavior. Arriving home, I settled in with my beer and cigarettes, trying to process everything that had happened and prepare for the next steps in this painful journey. The house phone rang sharply, pulling me from my thoughts. When I answered, a familiar voice greeted me, Ryan Turner, my wife's employer. The professional tone in his voice was a stark contrast to the casual demeanor I remembered from the party. I acknowledged that I knew who he was and inquired about the purpose of his call. Ryan quickly addressed my feelings of anger and betrayal over the events of Friday. He seemed to think that I was aware of and okay with Ella's activities at company gatherings. I couldn't believe his nerve. I asked him if he knew she was married during all of this, and he confirmed that he did. However, he explained that Ella had told him we were in an open marriage, and he had assumed I was fine with it. I pointed out that he had never bothered to verify this directly with me. I also brought up the videos they had sent me on Friday night. Ryan claimed that the videos were Ella's idea and offered a regretful apology. He asked if there was anything he could do to make amends. I was clear about my terms. I wanted him to testify against Ella in court, and I planned to sue him for alienation of affection. My parting shot was that if he wanted to make things right, he needed to accept my terms without any fuss. Ryan seemed taken aback by my demands. He asked if I was really going through with the lawsuit, and I confirmed, stressing that their actions had violated their own moral standards and had destroyed my marriage. He dismissed my concerns as being all in good fun and insisted they never intended to ruin my life. I questioned his expectations, expressing disbelief that he thought I would appreciate their behavior. He seemed to be clinging to some misguided notion that internet stories about revenge might apply to him. Ryan tried to convince me that we could work things out, fearing that a lawsuit could ruin them. I dismissed his pleas as irrelevant to my situation and ended the call. Grabbing a beer, I went to the balcony for a smoke. The calm I sought was short-lived. By Wednesday, Ryan and his cohorts were served with legal papers at Ella's office. Sophie called, clearly astonished by my actions. She said I hadn't given Ella a chance to explain herself and highlighted how humiliated Ella was. I was indifferent, firmly stating that I didn't care about Ella's feelings after everything she had done. I instructed Sophie not to contact me again and slammed the phone down. Moments later, I received another call from a number I recognized as coming from Ryan's office. I answered, angry, and was met with Ryan's insults and threats. He accused me of ruining his life and vowed to reciprocate by ruining mine. I slammed the phone down in frustration and immediately called Mia Thompson to inform her of the threat. Mia's response was practical and reassuring. Good, she said. I'll file for a temporary restraining order against Ella and her associates today. I'll make sure you get a copy of the order. Remember what I said. Don't do anything stupid. I asked what to do if Ryan came after me. She advised me to ensure I had witnesses and to avoid instigating any conflict. I understood her warning and took it to heart. Later that afternoon, there was a knock on the door. It was Mia's courier delivering the restraining order, just as she had promised. I decided to take additional precautions and purchased a small motion-activated camera to monitor the front room. I also kept a Louisville Slugger near the front door for protection. If Ryan or anyone else tried to follow through on their threats, I wanted to be prepared both for evidence and for self-defense. For the remainder of the week, things were relatively peaceful. I didn't hear anything from Sophie, Ella, or her boyfriends until Saturday night. I was sitting on the balcony, enjoying a beer and a cigarette, when the doorbell rang. Moments later, there was pounding on the door. I ground out my cigarette and went inside to check through the peephole. Sure enough, it was Ryan, accompanied by someone else, and the pounding continued. Ryan was shouting, claiming I was violating the restraining order. I told him I was calling the police, and he protested, demanding that I open the door. I continued dialing emergency services, and when the operator answered, I explained the situation. The operator informed me that they had received multiple calls for that area and dispatched cruisers to my location. They advised me not to open the door until the officers arrived. I thanked them and ended the call. The pounding on the door grew louder, and I wondered if Ryan would try to force his way in. I clutched the baseball bat tighter and waited. Soon, I heard the commotion of police officers arriving. Looking through the peephole, I saw two large officers putting Ryan and the other man in cuffs. One of the officers knocked on my door and identified themselves as police. I opened the door and Ryan, being led away to the cruiser, glared at me and continued to yell threats. The officer asked if I knew him, and I nodded, showing him a copy of the restraining order. The officer read it, spoke into his radio, and informed me that they would be taking Ryan and his accomplice downtown for the night. I explained the situation to the officer, who thanked me for my cooperation and assured me that Ryan likely wouldn't be a problem for a while. I closed and locked the door, then returned to the balcony with a fresh beer. The next day, the news broke with the headline, "Hedge Fund CEO Arrested." Over the following days, articles detailed how several clients were pulling their investments from SG funds due to the company's involvement in ruining employees' marriages. The financial fallout for the company was significant. I thought to myself, good, they deserved it. Returning to work the following Monday was a daunting experience. The office seemed to buzz with a kind of energy I wasn't quite ready for. Despite my best efforts to concentrate, my thoughts kept drifting back to the whirlwind of the past few weeks. After about 3 weeks of no contact, a call from Mia Thompson broke the silence. Her voice, though warm, carried an undertone of urgency. She asked how I was holding up, and I replied honestly that I was managing as well as could be expected under the circumstances. Mia then delivered the news that Ella had hired an attorney and had petitioned the court for marriage counseling. I was taken aback. The judge had agreed to the petition, ordering 6 counseling sessions starting that week. I questioned whether they could mandate marriage counseling, and Mia confirmed that they could indeed. She explained that not attending could result in contempt of court charges and even jail time. Despite my reluctance and strong feelings of betrayal, Mia emphasized the importance of my attendance. Reluctantly, I agreed to the sessions. Mia assured me that if the counselor found no hope for reconciliation, they would inform the judge. I asked if there was anything else I needed to know, and Mia revealed that Ella's attorney had informed her of Ella's pregnancy. The news was like a punch to the gut. The prospect of waiting another 8 or 9 months for legal actions was frustrating. Mia confirmed that this delay was unavoidable and added that if the child turned out to be mine, I would be obligated to pay child support. On a brighter note, she informed me that the judge had approved a legal separation until the baby was born. I made a sarcastic comment about the situation, and Mia provided the counselor's address, wishing me luck. I jotted the information down on my calendar, feeling a mix of dread and resolve. The day of the first counseling session arrived, and I made it clear to myself that I would not entertain the idea of reconciling with Ella. When I arrived at the counselor's office, I was ushered in promptly. The office was warm and inviting, but it did nothing to ease my anxiety. A somewhat older woman, Dr. Emily Rivers, looked at me over her glasses as I entered. Ella was already seated across from her on a love seat, looking somewhat forlorn and out of place. Dr. Rivers introduced herself and suggested that I sit next to Ella on the love seat. I opted instead for a smaller wooden chair positioned at a 45-degree angle to the love seat. I wanted to maintain some distance, both physically and emotionally. I expressed my lack of choice in being there, and Dr. Rivers acknowledged this but conveyed her satisfaction at my attendance. She then turned to Ella, asking about her hopes for the sessions. Ella expressed her desire to reunite with me, highlighting the upcoming baby and her wish to be a family again. I reacted with derision, unable to mask my contempt. Dr. Rivers turned to me, asking about my expectations. I responded clearly. Reconciliation was not an option. I wanted her to understand that there was no chance of repairing what had been so severely broken, nodding in Ella's direction. I could see Ella recoil slightly at my statement. Dr. Rivers then asked if I would consider reconciliation for the child's sake. I reiterated my doubt about being the father and expressed my commitment to support the child if it turned out to be mine. However, I firmly stated that reconciliation with Ella was out of the question. In response to Dr. Rivers's persistent questioning, I pulled out my phone and showed her the videos that had been sent to me, hoping to convey the depth of Ella's betrayal. Dr. Rivers's expression shifted to one of disgust after watching the videos. As I put my phone away, I couldn't help but challenge her on how she would feel if the roles were reversed, if it were her husband in those videos. I emphasized the ongoing betrayal over more than a year, even in front of her. Dr. Rivers insisted that the focus should remain on Ella and me and the upcoming child. I countered by stating that Ella had a child to consider and expressed my doubts about being the father. I demanded answers from Ella. After a moment of consideration, Dr. Rivers nodded and suggested that Ella owed me some answers. Ella, appearing embarrassed and visibly distressed, finally looked up and agreed to provide answers. Emily then gave me the floor to speak directly to Ella. I started by asking if Ella had known what was going to happen on the night of the party. She confirmed that she had known. I pressed further, questioning if this was the real reason she didn't want me to go. Ella admitted that it was. Reflecting on the humiliating experience, I accused her and the others of planning to humiliate me. She reluctantly agreed. I went on to question whether the intention was to humiliate me even more at Ryan's place. Ella confirmed it, appearing sheepish. I then inquired about the duration of her involvement with other men at SG. She admitted that it had been ongoing since she joined the company. I was shocked and asked for the reason behind her actions. She casually replied that she enjoyed it, finding it fun, naughty, and exciting, and it made her feel desirable. When I asked her how many men she had been with, excluding me, she nonchalantly mentioned around 4 or 5 dozen. I was outraged, emphasizing the risks of venereal diseases. My anger reached a boiling point when I asked if she knew the father of the child she was carrying. Ella admitted she was uncertain. Confronting her about the expectation for me to raise and financially support the child, I expressed my lack of love for her and my strong resentment. I even admitted hoping for a negative outcome. Ella and Dr. Rivers appeared shocked by my words, and Ella seemed on the verge of tears, though my anger remained unabated. In an attempt to inflict more emotional pain, Dr. Rivers intervened, signaling that I had made my point. She attempted to shift the focus back to the potential for reconciliation, but I rejected the notion of discarding 5 years of marriage, attributing the breakdown entirely to Ella's infidelity. I contested the characterization of our marriage as 5 good years, emphasizing that the last year had been far from genuine, especially given Ella's admission of involvement with 48 to 60 men and her uncertainty about the paternity of her child. Dr. Rivers concluded the session, stating that she intended to conduct individual sessions with each of us before determining the next steps. We scheduled our appointments for the following week, and I left the office. In the parking lot, Ella called out to me, but I ignored her and headed to my car. As I drove away, I saw Ella sobbing over her steering wheel. A part of me felt a grim satisfaction, thinking it fitting that she was experiencing some of the emotional pain she had caused me. Later that night, my phone rang with a call from Sophie, her voice seething with anger. She blamed me for Ella's condition, conveying that Ella was in the hospital due to a mishap. Sophie accused me of mistreating Ella and expressed her frustration with my apparent lack of concern. I defended myself, asserting that I had only spoken the truth and contrasted it with Ella's actions over the past year. Sophie questioned my indifference towards Ella's hospital situation, to which I responded with an indifferent tone. Sophie criticized me harshly, calling me a loser and emphasizing that, as Ella was still legally my wife, I should at least provide insurance information to cover her medical bills. After a moment of reflection, I decided to visit Ella in the hospital, acknowledging the information Mia had shared earlier. Sophie provided me with the room details, and I made my way to the hospital. Upon arrival, I approached the nurse's station, provided my insurance information, and briefly discussed Ella's condition with the doctor. The doctor explained the complexities of pregnancies, and while the specific cause of the mishap remained uncertain, the overall prognosis seemed positive. Curious about the pregnancy's duration, I learned that Ella was approximately 9 or 10 weeks along. This left a possibility that the child could be mine, but I considered it largely inconsequential. The mishap signaled an opportunity to proceed with the divorce, which seemed like the most important aspect. After ascertaining that Ella was expected to be fine, I entered her hospital room. Ella lay in bed, looking distressed with tears in her eyes. Sophie, positioned at the end of the bed, expressed her displeasure at my presence. I responded with a growl, which made her retreat from the room, leaving Ella and me alone. Facing Ella, I acknowledged the finality of our relationship. She questioned whether I truly hated her as much as I had claimed earlier. I admitted that, at that moment, my feelings had somewhat softened, but I firmly emphasized that reconciliation was impossible due to the severe breach of trust she had demonstrated. I expressed my frustration with her behavior, reflecting on how each trip she made to the store left me wondering if she was involved with the checkout clerks. Ella questioned the sudden turn of disrespect, highlighting how I had treated her exceptionally well throughout our years together. She denied any wrongdoing on my part and acknowledged my role as a devoted husband. However, I countered her argument by stating that if she truly valued me, she would have resisted the advances of others. Ella admitted to succumbing to the influence of others who claimed that it was normal for husbands to witness their wives with other men. I dismissed her explanation, emphasizing that the divorce was inevitable and any attempts to salvage the relationship were futile. Ella tearfully accepted the reality of our separation and agreed to inform her lawyer the next day. I sternly clarified that any hopes of friendship were unrealistic. Despite her apologies, I remained resolute in my decision to end the marriage. I looked at her for a few moments before starting to leave. "Yeah," I said, pausing at the door. "Goodbye, Ella." As I walked away, I could hear her crying. Tough luck, I thought to myself. Good riddance. A few days later, I received a call from Mia. True to her promise, Ella had abandoned all objections to the divorce. Dr. Emily Rivers had written a report stating that reconciliation was impossible, which was a significant relief. Mia also informed me that while Emily suggested I undergo anger management, the judge concurred with the recommendation but stopped short of making it a court order. On a positive note, Mia managed to secure settlements from SG funds, as well as from Ryan and Jack. About a month later, she handed me the largest check I had ever seen. "That's minus my fee, of course," she said with a smile. I nodded. Certainly. I deposited the check and tried to move on with my life as best as I could. SG Funds, or as I often thought of it, Sodom and Gomorrah, shut its doors approximately 6 months later. It seemed that clients had lost trust in the company's financial integrity. Wonder why? I cynically mused to myself. Ryan and Jack remained silent after the incident at the apartment. Both served a 30-day stint in county jail for their stunt and seemed eager to avoid a repeat. With their reputations tarnished, they sought a fresh start on the West Coast. Ella and Sophie continued sharing the same apartment, transitioning to employment in a strip mall retail store specializing in women's clothing and cosmetics. I occasionally encountered them but never acknowledged their presence. Remaining single, I casually dated over the next couple of years. Eventually, I met Ava Morgan, a recent divorcee. Our dating journey was slow and easy, lasting a few months. Like me, Ava had experienced the pain of infidelity in her previous marriage. Understanding her hurt, I did my best to provide support and comfort. In the initial weeks of our relationship, our activities revolved around conversations or outings for dinner and a movie. Recognizing her vulnerability, I took the time to engage in comforting activities such as holding hands and enjoying leisurely strolls through the park. Despite finding her attractive, I opted to let her take the lead in our relationship. After a delightful dinner at her condo, Ava observed me with a curious intensity and questioned whether I found her appealing. With a smile, I assured her of my attraction, stating that it extended beyond physical aspects. Curious about my lack of initiative, she playfully inquired if I liked girls. I responded with a positive outlook on the situation, indicating that I was open to where things might lead.